So the program was established in 1984 at the height of the victims' rights movement. It was a time where states were passing laws to ensure that victims were able to participate in the criminal justice system, and they realized that they need to create a location where victims, service providers can go to get information about victims' rights and also find resources in their county. And that's when we were established in 1984, and we are mandated by penal code. And our intent, the legislature wanted us to operate a statewide hotline for crime victims where we provide this critical information. McGeorge School of Law has been the home of the Victims Legal Resource Center since 1984, and the program has grown. Now we have a legal center and we do other projects, but really our core mission is to operate the hotline and now a website where crime victims can go to get information about their legal rights as they're going through the criminal justice system. What we find a lot of times is that victims fall through the gaps because they're not, the prosecutor represents the state of California and the defendant has an attorney, so a lot of times the victims get lost in the process. They don't understand their role. They don't know the rights. So victims can call us and we can provide them with that information about their rights and then help them access information about services which a lot of times they don't have, where they can get information like notification of custody status for the defendant, and you can imagine sometimes that's very critical for a victim, especially if they're fearing for their safety. Information about how they can be heard in proceedings, how they can request to participate in the parole process, information on how they can access victim compensation. A lot of victims incur substantial economic loss as a result of the crime, so they need financial assistance. So we are able to provide them with all that information. And yeah, we've been at McGeorge since 1984, and McGeorge students have the opportunity to engage in this program that's really one of a kind, not only in the state of California, but in the entire country. There's not another program that engages law students throughout their education and allows them to participate and learn about victims' rights as our program does. So I wanted to go to law school to help people, as most people want to go to law school in an effort to assist those who are unable to help themselves. So that's why I went to law school. Didn't really know what area of the law I wanted to practice in, so I did a lot of externships during law school, tried clinics, and then ended up finding out about the Victims Legal Resource Center in my last semester of law school. And I worked for just a few hours a week here and realized that victims had constitutional rights, something that I was not aware of, and then realized that victims were not aware of those rights and the resources. So I really fell in love with this area of the law because I feel like there's so much opportunity to affect change for crime victims and to make change on a statewide level and to make these rights meaningful in a reality for crime victims. Yeah, so the Know Your Rights presentation is a presentation that's geared towards both service providers and the community in general, and it's intended to educate folks about victims' rights. Unlike defendants' rights, so Miranda, that a lot of people are very familiar with, and actually young kids can recite it back to us very easily because it's part of our culture, Marsy's Law or victims' constitutional rights are not. A lot of service providers are not aware of them, and victims more often than not have never heard of them. And these are 17 rights that the victims have as they're going through the criminal justice system. So that presentation is intended to educate the audience on who a legal victim is under Marsy's Law and what those rights are, and really focusing on the rights that have to be requested and what request means, what it looks like, and how victims and service providers can take steps to make these rights a reality for crime victims. Yeah, so we launched a podcast a few years ago called Knowledge is Power, Victim to Survivor. That's intended to be a new way for crime victims and service providers to access information about victims' rights, victim services, and other issues pertaining to crime victims through the podcast. I commute to work. I have a longer commute, so I listen to a lot of podcasts. So that's kind of where the idea came from. I was like, well, we were applying for a grant called Innovative Services, and I did a quick search and didn't really find a lot of podcasts out there intended for to deliver information for crime victims and service providers on victims' rights related issues. So we were one of the first to launch a podcast specifically aimed at this population, addressing this issue, the victims' rights issue. And we are on season 3 now, and season 3 is actually in Spanish. So it's intended to fill the gap of information for the Spanish-speaking community, provide information on victims' rights, victim services. We interview leaders in the victims' rights field and victim services field, and they get a chance to share information about the resources and the services that they provide as well for crime victims. Yeah, I have a wonderful team, and we call ourselves the VLRC family because we see ourselves as a family. All my team currently are McGeorge alums, my full-time staff, and then I work with wonderful students through the externship program, and then also I have work study and non-work study students. So I have 5 full-time staff members. We have our wonderful administrative assistant, and then I have a staff attorney, Adam Silva, who graduated from McGeorge several years ago and has been with me for a few years now. And I have 3 recent grads who have also come back. They worked at the center as students and fell in love with this area of the law, just like I did, and they've come back. But yeah, I do love to hire McGeorge students and expose them to this area of the law, because it's not something that's generally taught as students are going through law school, so they really get to see the criminal justice system from a different lens, and I think it makes them better practitioners no matter what they decide to eventually practice in. I have a lot of students that want to go and become DAs, others that want to go into criminal defense, and others who don't know what they want to do, but they are interested in learning more. So I think being exposed to victims' rights makes them a much better rounded practitioner, and no matter what area of the law you end up practicing in, you will encounter a victim of a crime. So this will give you the tools to educate them. You might be that one person that is put in the path of the crime victim, to let them know, hey, you have rights as you're going through the process, and make sure that those rights become a reality for that victim.